Okay, everybody, we're going to get going. Good morning. I'm Terry Shelton and worked with Kurt Sipple and Dennis Dresang on this series. And want to welcome everybody with us. If you're tuning in, if you can mute yourself, that would be great. If you have questions, you can toss them into the chat, and I'll pull them out and give them to Brendan, or he can poke at them himself. We're really, really pleased to have Brendan Bussman with us today, live from Las Vegas. And this is a program we wanted to do last year, but then we got sucked away on some other things because it's a hot topic. But he was very willing when I sent him a note last year to ask about what's going on with gaming in Wisconsin. At the time, the Potawatomi and the Oneida, well, actually only the Oneida at the time were doing gambling. And of course, Wisconsin doesn't do that. And he very generously agreed to give us some time to explain the whole thing. Global Market Advisors specializes in.
Yeah, I just had to acknowledge that
John, I
it was
think
being live streamed and it was being recorded. So
somebody's got their mic. There we go. So Global Market Advisors specializes in sports betting and gaming and all angles of it. Legalization, regulation, operation, contract negotiations. And I'm going to turn it over to Brendan and let him explain more about how he got to doing what he's doing, what they do, and what's up with Wisconsin. And are we missing out on things, or are we being good and holy?
Well,
Brendan?
Terry, first and foremost, thank you for allowing me to join this group. As you mentioned, I was originally supposed to do this in November, and I was sitting here thinking, why couldn't I do it in November? And I remember now, because this project is actually out of the bag, and while I can't talk about it, I was working on it that time, probably about 2.5 weeks ago, actually 3 weeks ago to the day. You maybe saw in the news that the United Arab Emirates had legalized gaming and was developing a Wynn Resorts over there in one of the Emirates. That was a project that I have been and continue to be involved with.
Wow.
But that's why I couldn't make your November meeting when we originally had this scheduled, because I was in the air somewhere probably over the Atlantic, I think, at the time. So a little bit about me and a little bit about Global Market Advisors and just the general gaming space. And, once I get into this, I want this to be a very free-flowing conversation with all of you. Would love to hear your perspectives, would love to hear your questions. I don't expect this to be a lecture. I literally have one slide that I wanted to make sure, because it shows representative over everything. I have other colleagues of mine that a friend of mine just gave a presentation last week, and she goes, well, I've got 70 slides for this. I'm like, what do you do with 70 slides? She goes, well, I have to talk for 3 hours. I'm like, I'd have like 5. But I first got involved in the gaming industry back in 2004. Was originally and still hold Nebraska as home, but grew up in Nebraska, worked for the football program up there. That's when the program actually was winning and good, as opposed to Wisconsin kicking our butts every year for I don't know how many years now. I've lost track.
Yeah.
It's one of those, Nebraska's on the schedule, we'll win this game type thing, I think, from your perspective. But was approached after that all fell out by, at that point in time, Las Vegas Sands, that was trying to pass gaming in my home state back in Nebraska. Unfortunately, we weren't successful in getting across the finish line in 2004. It did in 20, which we can talk about later as well. But then they said, hey, do you want to come to Vegas? And I figured it'd be a 3-year stint. Nothing real, exciting, never intended to live in Vegas, but Vegas has been home now for, it'll be 18 years this summer. So, well, I say 18 years, yes, that is the case that I've resided here, but, I spend a lot of time on this round cylinder that has wings, that's metal. And so no different than I'll be hopping on a plane later on this afternoon to go to Kansas to testify on a gaming related bill tomorrow, and then talking with some folks in Kansas City on sports betting on Thursday. So You know, it's a very interesting market out there. And I will tell you that there isn't any aspect of the world that doesn't encapsulate gaming in some level. It's just a matter of, is it regulated? Is it not regulated? What is, what isn't? Obviously, you know, you've seen a plethora of gaming happen over the last 3.5 years, almost 4 in May, as it relates to sports betting, which we're going to talk about today. But there, you know, I've worked on projects everywhere on the globe. There hasn't been a continent other than Antarctica that I haven't touched, which I don't think there's a casino down there yet, but you know, time will tell over everything. But and that can be anywhere from a land-based casino that you would see in some of the tribal facilities you guys have in Wisconsin, to what I have here in Vegas, to stuff that's in Singapore, Macau, anywhere else around the world. So it could also be, you know, your neighbor to the west in Minnesota. They're also debating the sports betting issue, but they have this thing called electronic pull tabs, which I will tell you has been a great revenue source for their stadium there in US Bank Stadium. But it has completely undercut the tribes and what they've been trying to do from a gaming perspective over the course of time. GMA, the firm I'm with, we have been a firm around for 15, 16 years now, I guess, and basically have disciplines along the way. So whether it's understanding what the market opportunity is from a financial standpoint, understanding its economic impact, implementing the regs, getting the legislation passed, whether it be casino, parimutuel, sports betting, iGaming, the whole bit, or non-gaming related stuff. You know, I will say I've seen an increase, especially over the last probably 2-3 years, where you've seen a significant amount more, obviously, with sports, and not just, hey, sports betting, but it's, hey, I want to build an arena. Hey, I want to see how this works, to anywhere from hotels, shopping districts, F&B districts, the whole gamut. So with that as an intro, does anybody have any questions on that? Otherwise, I'd like to jump into sports betting.
No, I think go ahead, right in. Let's go at it.
Okay, let me go back and share my screen. Where'd it go? There's my map. So you should see on your screen there a map of the United States and a chart over to the side. Yep. And I wanted to illustrate this to say, here's where we're at with sports betting today in the United States. If you look historically, over the last, let's go back 5 years. So let's go back to 2017. There was a court case pending that the Supreme Court decided to take up, that was New Jersey versus the NCAA. And I shouldn't say just New Jersey, because at that point it was Governor Christie that was leading that. So it was Christie versus NCAA. And that stems back to a ballot initiative from 2012 that where New Jersey tried to legalize sports betting on the ballot, and the NCAA tied it up, as well as the other leagues, the NFL, the NBA, et cetera. And we'll get into how teams have started to play more of a significant role in this versus just your typical sports betting and casino operators along the way. They took up the case. They heard it in December of 2017. As a government affairs geek that largely deals with legislative and executive branch officials, I feel very fortunate that I actually got to sit in the courtroom of the Supreme Court to hear the case. Wow. It was one of those things on a whim. I found a way in and it worked. And so it was one of the best hours I can say I've honestly, because it was fascinating to watch the oral arguments on this. And it's one of those that if you ever get to hear a case argued before the Supreme Court, take it. I don't care what the case is, but it's well worth understanding that, you know, the one blessing, if you want to say that out of the pandemic, is they've taken a lot of these arguments that you can stream them and hear them orally. And it's fascinating just to hear that as much as hear the interaction, see it, you know, live in person. Wow. But on May 14th of 2018, the Supreme Court came down and said, hey, PASPA, which is the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act that banned sports betting back in 1992, was ruled unconstitutional and allowed states to move forward. And I distinctly remember Governor Christie on the steps back in December of 17, the Supreme Court doing media afterwards and saying, we'll be live within 2 weeks after this case is overturned, and we're going to be live in Jersey at that point. And he was pretty damn close. They were about 3 weeks. But shortly after the overturning of that, New Jersey became the first state outside of the original 4 grandfathered in to have legal sports betting. The 4, just as note before, Nevada, which is obviously known for sports betting and has been for the last, several decades. But you had Oregon, Montana, and Delaware that were previously in there, but really didn't have any activity. Delaware did have some parlay betting through the lottery, but it was very ineffective over everything. Since then, over the course of time, which most of this started in 2019, where states started to legalize, you've seen what now in the map you have before you today, which has over 30 jurisdictions that are live with sports betting. And I say jurisdictions because you have the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, the latest to go live as of Friday of last week, and being able to move forward with sports betting. You have 2 states out there that still have not, while legal, have active sports betting. One of those being Ohio, and the other one being my home state of Nebraska, which we'll get into as we go through this. Just like everything else, there is not a market that is, there's some similarities, but each one of these states has looked at it differently. And I'll sort of put things into sort of 3 buckets along the way. And this will help explain the chart that's over on the right that talks about land versus mobile and looking at the market. Is Nevada, which obviously we've had sports betting for several decades. Before PASPA, you could come, place a bet at a counter, do whatever else. If you wanted to use this little device in Nevada, you still had to go at a sports book, register your name and fill out your whole application, give them your driver's license, so on and so forth, and that they would then create an account for you so you could use your mobile phone, but you still had to go fill it at a casino and redeem any winnings at a casino. And that actually became a problem for Nevada, because it's still that case today. In the middle of the pandemic, when sports started back up, you literally had people that were trying to fill their accounts and they couldn't. So they would turn the portico-shares, or the big awnings at the entrance of a casino, basically into drive-through tellers, because there was no way for them to get the money in or out other than to go to the casino. So Nevada has become somewhat of, I'll put in the hybrid model, which says we have land, we have mobile, but we still have in-person registration. Okay. If I go land in New Jersey tomorrow, I solely would have to be able to, well, I can do land and mobile there. I can literally take my app. I can download a DraftKings, a FanDuel, an MGM. I can put all my information in, put my credit card attached to it, and I can be wagering within 5 minutes. So that's what we refer to as a full mobile market. Okay. Other markets that are still land-based, Wisconsin being one of those, is solely focused on having those on tribal land to make sure that they can do it. West Washington's another, Mississippi's another, to be able to say, hey, here's what exists and here's where we're going forward with over everything. There is one market that is solely mobile. And I shouldn't say one, there's actually 2, but Virginia will be land-based eventually. They just don't have land-based casinos yet. But Tennessee, that didn't have anything in place prior to other than the lottery, said, we're not going to tie anything down. We're going to create an untethered market to be able to do this. And they literally will approve people. So like if I land in New Jersey today, if I land in Nashville today, I get on an app, I bet, and there's no place for me to go other than to go everything and use this as a device. So you can see there's a swath of different setups along the way to be able to do this.
I don't know. That's because we're
Does
on
anybody have
Zoom.
any questions off of that? Otherwise, I'm going to go into taxes a little bit next.
No, but I just want to remind everybody, keep the microphones off, please, if you can, and send me questions in the chat. It'd be the easiest way to keep it going. So the 3 buckets are hybrid, full mobile, and land-based?
Yep.
Okay.
Those are sort of the 3 buckets I put everything into.
Okay.
When I start teaching this, and I mean, you'll see a lot of white things on the map here, and we'll talk about some of these states along the way, but like case in point, Minnesota, your neighbor to the west, they're still trying to figure out how to do it. And I have a client in there. It's one of the tribes. When I first started this project with them, I guess technically 2.5 years ago, but really intently, about a year ago, they just said, hey, as we structure this, how do we need to look at it? Do we want land? Do we want mobile? Do we want some combination of a hybrid in between that? What does that look like? And what are the benefits and costs associated with it? I will say this, and I don't think that I'm sounding partisan when I say this over everything. I'm a firm believer in that the full mobile market is probably the best way to go. And I say that for 2 reasons. One, you're going to generate the most revenue because in most of these states, 80, 85, in some cases, 90% of the revenue comes from this device. You may be sitting in a sports book, but you're still using this for in-game. So, you're sitting there in the middle of the Super Bowl on Sunday going, okay, the odds, and I don't remember what they were. Let's say it was 3 points for the Rams to win by on that final drive for the Bengals. There were people betting up and down as that line changed in the middle of that, as they were seeing the Bengals take that last drive to be able to do that. So that's where in-game comes into play over everything. And that's where I might be sitting in a book, but I can use this just as efficiently than as opposed to going to a counter and doing everything along the way. The other protection that adds is I have 10 times the more databases and more accuracy that I can get to off of a mobile device, because I can verify who I am, what I'm doing, as well as put measures in for responsible gaming, so that I know, one, if I say, hey, I don't want to bet more than $100 on this game, $1,000 on this game, I can put that in as a parameter. And in order to go over that, I have to do X, Y, and Z to be able to do that. And if I do, great. If I don't, whatever else, but it gives you those consumer protections, as well as to say, oh, hey, and I'm making this up, Busman just popped up on the terrorist watch list. We know where he's at. Let's go get him. And be able to do that. Now, if all of a sudden you see this rated, that's something wrong happened. But, there are so many more parameters and checks and balances you can put in place with the use of this than you can if I have to go into a book, because you have much more anonymity along the way than anything else. So
one of the things that when I first started reading about some of this stuff, and I think you just confirmed it. So literally I could be sitting at a Bucks game and it's down to the overtime and Giannis is on the line and he has 2 shots and he needs 1 to win. And with that phone right there, if this was set up, I could be betting instantly on whether he's going to hit that and win the game.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
No, absolutely. Now, I will say the one challenge with that is being able to have that window open so that everyone can wager is one of the things the industry hasn't completely figured out yet. And I say that from the standpoint of go in your house and turn on 2 TVs on the same channel. 9 times out of 10,
yes,
they're not in sync. So there's a delay somewhere along the way. So that's what reduces the betting window, so that you only have this much to wager on, as opposed to if I have everybody in sync, I have this much. And so streaming technology, the way it's advancing, is very much going to help keep that window broader, because I can be able to have more people look at it in the same frame, as opposed to, hey, you're sitting in game, you're sitting there watching it, and you're saying he's going to make the free throw. And then he misses it. You text your buddy and say, go bet the other. If that window's open big, he ends up winning, you lost along the way. And it just causes for some confusion. So in-game is great, but that window is very tight right now, but it needs to widen, and technology will help drive that.
Okay. All right. Tell us about tax.
Brendan, I've got a quick question here.
Yep.
Is your discussion include horse racing? Because I thought that you could bet on horses in Florida, California, Kentucky.
So there's two types of wagering, and I'm glad you brought that up, because what you're talking about to be able to intertwine this is basically fixed odds wagering. So if you go to a track today, and this actually is partially, you're giving me prep for my argument tomorrow in Kansas, because I'm talking about pari-mutuel tomorrow. That is based off of a pool of wagers. So the payouts are determined based off of who bets on what, as well as how much is in that pool. With sports betting, it is just, you walk in, I put $10 down. Oh, let me use this. I put $11 down to win 10 based off of a bet. If I get it, if I win, I'm going to get 21 back. If I lose, they keep the 11 I put in. Okay. That 1% is basically what the house gets to keep, because the saying the house always wins is very accurate, because the odds are, if you think of roulette as the example off of this, roulette, the best you can do is 35-1 on odds. There's 36 different number choices. So there's always that small percentage they're going to do. That's what happens on sports betting along the way, to say, what's that little margin where I'm always going to make something along the way to make that happen. Okay. What horse racing is attempting to do, and this is actually, I've got a client I'm working on with this, is be able to transition some of those people over to from the sports betting market to get them interested in horse racing. And then it would be fixed odds. So in other words, let's go to the Kentucky Derby and say, okay, look, horse whatever is at 3-1 odds to win the thing. Okay. You're going to be guaranteed that amount when you walk in the door to be able to do that. Okay. Versus I go get a ticket today, I don't know my winnings until the race is over. And so people like to know, especially a younger generation, what's my payoff? What am I going to get? What's the delta on this to be able to do that? And that's why horse racing is trying to figure out a way that it can attach onto sports wagering, so that one, you can get people while they're sitting there, if they're at a book and they'll see, hey, X race is going on, let me monitor that while I'm going. Or two, as the Kentucky Derby's coming up here in 3 months or so, hey, let me put a parlay on to say, hey, I think X horse is going to win the Derby. And it happens to be at the same time when the Bucks are in the playoffs playing whoever. And if they both win, you'd have that parlay that would multiply that even further. So anybody else have any questions? Otherwise, I want to sort of jump into how tax rates differ across the country.
Yeah, let's get to that. That sounds good.
Yeah. So, probably the biggest jurisdiction out there that recently had some tax issues is New York. And when Governor Cuomo proposed sports betting as part of his budget address last year, he said, basically, I believe that the people should have the money and not the entities. So I'm going to demand a high tax rate when we're going to send this out and get it. So we have mobile sports betting in New York State. What they ended up with was basically a 51% tax rate that allows zero deductions along the way. So if you look at a sports betting dollar, and this is, I'm going to talk about it in big terms, and then we'll get down to how it's sort of changing a little bit. If I look at a dollar of everything that's wagered, which is called handle, that would be equal to $1. What revenue off of that typically is about 5% or a nickel. Okay. So 95% of everything goes back into the pot and gets split between all of us winners on this call today. And all the losers that aren't on here, they help pay for that. Okay. Out of that nickel is where I take out my taxes, my operating expenses, the federal excise tax, and then any marketing spend I have off of that. If you look at typical expenses off of sports betting and a typical marketing spend, that's about 48% of that. So about 2.5 cents automatically goes to that. On top of that, then is where I'm going to pay my taxes. Okay. If I'm in a state like New York and I have a 51% tax rate, I'm at 99% of my nickel taken already, and I haven't paid the feds their portion of the excise tax along the way yet, which the excise tax is equal to about 5% on top of that. Okay. So I've got to figure out where I either save money on that or I reduce marketing spend. So as I said to all my colleagues in the sports betting business, when they all won the contracts to win the licenses, and there's 9 operators out there, 6 of them are live today. I said, congrats, you now have the ability, you've won the ability to lose money in the state of New York. And if you talk to most of them today, they're like, yeah, we're burning money through, but it'll all work out in the end, which we'll see if it works out in the end. Now, we'll take that as a comparative when you sit there and look at Nevada and Iowa that have tax rates of 6.75%. So you've got complete polar opposites on what that range is. What we have found economically, and this was something that when we first started this whole sports betting debate in 2017, we said, what is the ultimate tax rate of where you still have enough money for the operator to continue to invest and innovate in the market, make a profit, as well as give good revenue to the state and make it all work? And we determined that rate was a tax rate of about 15%, knowing you have 5% on top of that for the Fed. So it's an effective tax rate of 20% along the way. But then if you take out roughly the 48% for your operating, and marketing spend is high, especially in these early states, you're at a point where you're bringing in, about 20% margin over everything when push comes to shove, which I mean is a good amount. But in some cases, marketing spend, which is the next thing I want to talk about, becomes so high that you literally have people spending way beyond their means to be able to do that. So my point on tax rates is not everybody has the secret sauce. I think I want to say the average right now is about 18 or 19% across the United States. If you take into account all of these, it might be a little bit higher because I don't remember how much Puerto Rico may have ticked that down a little bit because they're in lower. But you've got states across the way that it's a complete, conundrum over everything. The other thing I'll say to that, and this goes to the Wisconsin argument, the Washington argument, what may likely be the Minnesota and Oklahoma arguments, as well as California, which is what do tribes pay in as opposed to a commercial operator. So, New York, I highlight the 51%, the 6.75 here in Nevada. That's what me as a commercial operator would pay into the state along the way. Tribes will pay in a portion of their revenue, but they view it more as a payment, and it depends on how it's structured. So in the case of Arizona, it's also a tribal state. They only pay revenue into the state based off of what they do off reservation. So anything they do in a land-based setting on reservation remains with them. Anything off is going to be at the tax rate that everybody else would pay along the way. Washington and Wisconsin went in and basically said, we're going to pay the state X in exchange to being able to grant this, and it was done through a change in the compact to make that approved. So tribes will always refer to it as a payment, not a tax, because no government pays a tax to another government from their perspective. So it's a payment from one government entity to another. So does anybody have any questions off of that? Otherwise, I'd like to jump into marketing.
Go right ahead.
So as I mentioned, that ops portion is about 48%, which typically includes a regular spend on marketing. What we have found is states will go in heavy to get early adoption and lure people into their app along the way so they get market share. And they will spend ungodly amounts on advertising dollars as well as in promo play to do it. And, unheard of in Nevada before the repeal of PASPA. But even in Nevada here, you'll get offers if you're opening up a new account to do $300 to $500 of free play to be able to, after you've made your first deposit. The biggest I've heard of was actually in New York when it opened up a month ago. Caesars was giving, and I don't remember how much you had to put in. I want to say it was $300 to get 3,000. So if you opened your account up with $300, you also got $3,000 of free play to bet on sports.
Wow.
Now, the ultimate example of where this worked out for the bettor and didn't work out for the operator, and I think it was FanDuel that had this happen 2 weeks ago. So it was the AFC NFC Championship weekend. Somebody had $20 worth of free play. They put it on a parlay for the exact score of the game between the Chiefs and the Bengals and the 49ers and the Rams, hit it, and they won $589,000. Didn't cost them a dime, didn't cost them the $20 because it was all free. But that's where you have people that go into this market saying, I've got to spend so much money up front to be able to recoup it on the end because I'll plan on making money in 2025 as opposed to making money today. And case in point, and I'll see what DraftKings says on their earnings call on Friday. But you have MGM had their earnings call, which BetMGM has a very robust app. They're in a majority of these states along the way. They said they lost over $50 million last quarter on sports betting, which to me, I sit there and go, is that the most prudent use of resources to be able to do it? But, there are different mentalities amongst operators where they say, I'm in this to win it and I'll spend whatever it takes because the payoff's good at the end, versus other operators that will come into play and say, hey, I want to make money at the end of year one and I'm going to do it the right way. So that's where things are all over the map.
That's interesting. As I recall, too, the last couple of Super Bowls, there were lots of advertisements for like FanDuel and the sports betting. This time, of course, it was cryptocurrency, which some people say is a type of betting going on there too, with what's going to be around. But yeah, you're right. When I think about that, there used to be a ton of ads on the Super Bowl. A couple of last 2 years for that.
Well, and actually that's a good transition, because one of the things off of marketing that I wanted to talk about next was where it has blurred into media and culture as much as anything else. And we use the Super Bowl as an example. 20 years ago, roughly, the NFL would not allow Las Vegas to even advertise a, hey, come to Las Vegas advertisement in the middle of the Super Bowl. If you go back and watch all the ads that were in the Super Bowl this last weekend, 3 of the operators had at least one ad that was either, hey, go bet my app, or a responsible gaming ad. You had NBC that had the broadcast that had built into their sports betting operating partner in PointsBet that would give in all the pregame, here's the latest odds over everything. No different than if you guys all turn on Sports Center right now, you're going to see in the ticker, hey, the game tonight. I don't know if the Bucks play tonight or not, but I guarantee there's the odds next to it of what the over under is and who's favored by how much along the way. So the leagues and the media have definitely done a complete 360, 180, whatever you want to call it, on how they've accepted all this. And now it is a booming business from an ad perspective. And even so much as not only have the leagues started to cash in on this, teams have also started to cash in on this. And actually, as I say this, I should have brought this slide in, and I'll find it if you guys want me to send it out to you. I always talk about the evolution of teams over the course of time, and I use the old graphic of the evolution of man, where you go from Neanderthal to Homo sapien and everything else along the way. As the key example, if you look back at PASPA was opposed, and Governor Christie's effort to legalize was opposed by the NFL, the NCAA, NBA, Major League Baseball, and I'm missing one in there. I think the NHL. Okay. So all the pro leagues and the NCAA said, we're against this. Now, if you look at, and I know, Terry, you sent me this article last week about how the Bucks went with Betway as their sponsor. I'm sure, I think you guys have one of the regional sports networks up there that is now branded Bally's along the way. To even so much as, if you look at the state of Arizona, they gave away 10 licenses, mobile licenses statewide, directly to teams. So the Diamondbacks, the Cardinals, the Coyotes, the Suns, the NASCAR guys, the PGA, all of those all have direct sports betting licenses and partners. So they're getting a take off of it along the way. Now, obviously, it's a private contractual relationship, whatever else. But you now see in the case of Arizona, and one of the reasons why I'll be in Kansas City tomorrow night and Thursday, meeting with teams down there, is they now want to put venues in their stadiums that are basically sports books. Whether it's hey, here's a 24/7 operation like what first started in the District of Columbia with Capital One Arena, to, hey, give me a really cool suite where I can go have everybody hang out and wager at the same time. And so you have this mix match of everything that's blending together from a team perspective to be able to say, hey, we were against this, but now we're all for it. And there's been some steps along the way of where they've made other things. You know, once it became legal, one of the things they asked for was a 1% integrity fee, which would have been equal to, that would have been equal to 20% of the overall tax rate. So it would have added 20% to the tax. That basically would have been, hey, we want money off the top because this is our content. That has since gone the way because they figured, one, they were wrong on the 1%, but two, they're like, yeah, we can't do that. But then they started to mandate data feeds, which data feeds, Terry, I'll go back to your example where they plug in, especially on in-game, to say, okay, did he make the free throw? Didn't he make the free throw? You know, what are the actual official stats? That what the NBA and the NFL do is they go cut a deal with Sport Radar or Genius Sports or somebody else out there that says, you're going to be my official data provider. And any wagers that are done by X operator up to just under 5%, because 5% is a threshold in the gaming industry that provides extra level of scrutiny from a suitability perspective and background check, that I'm going to get that revenue. So if I'm X operator and I have $100 million that comes through my wagers on the NFL, 5% of that's going to go back to the league just for the use of the data.
Oh,
So,
you know, I had read an article recently about that, as you were saying about the odds being down on the bottom of the screen, and you know, over, under, whatever. I don't know what they all mean, but the article was arguing that stuff is there where, like in a baseball game, it used to be someone's batting average. It used to be you filled up that space down below with information about the player and the history of what he's doing or how she's shooting or something. And now there's, the box is not about that. The box is about over and under.
absolutely. Well, and even so much as you talk about that, and this is twofold, you know, you used to have buried in the newspaper, and I can say that to this crowd because you guys actually know what a newspaper is. Anything younger than me sort of looks at it and goes, what the hell are you, why would you ever have a newspaper? You know, along the way. But as I say that, I still have the RJ and the Wall Street Journal that come to my house for print. along the way. But you turn to the sports section, and those were the only odds you ever got.
Yeah.
And it's what they listed. The funny thing about those odds now, and this happened, I think it was last summer, is now like with the Associated Press, when they pull those are actually brought to you by FanDuel. So the Associated Press went out, got a sponsor, and said, who's going to be our official provider of that? And so that then became another monetized event for media.
No kidding.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Well, and I'll tell you, I mean, I didn't know, and this was something that somebody asked me once, well, who publishes the odds in the paper? And I said, I have no clue where they've gotten those from. Over the course of time, I always used somebody in Nevada provided them to them, but no one could ever say, hey, it was Superbook or MGM or whoever else along the way. So,
we got a couple of questions to ask you.
Yep.
As teams start generating significant revenue from sports betting, won't teams like the Packers, Bucks, Badgers be at a significant competitive disadvantage?
So, and that's a good segue, because I wanted to talk about obviously what it means for Wisconsin and how that is.
Yeah.
There is, from a league perspective at this point, I'm going to call it a mandate, but probably isn't a fair term when I say this, but the leagues have basically gone out and said, look, guys, you're more than willing to go get a sponsor off of this. So there's revenue straight off the top for them, even if they don't have a book within their facility, to say, hey, I'm going to make Oneida as my official sportsbook provider along the way. Okay. And I'm just using that as an example because I know they have a good relationship with the Packers. The second is where I sort of went into, which is we have direct access to a license. We want to put in, even if it isn't legal within the stadium, we have a special zone that's designed by MGM or FanDuel or Wynn or whoever else along the way to be able to do it. So are they losing revenue opportunity? To some extent, yes, because it isn't direct. Where I take exception to that is, and this is being the sports guy that I am, at what point do the teams cross a line of knowing more along the way if they're also operators? And I say that for two reasons. One, in the case of Arizona, and I'll use the Suns as an example. The Suns have FanDuel as their official sports betting partner. FanDuel had to go get background checks. FanDuel had to be found suitable, say, hey, you're going to run a book clean and above board. No one from the Suns ever had to go through that, okay? If I'm a casino here in Nevada and I do a similar situation, I'll use the Virgin Hotel as an example here because it's a prime example. The guy that runs it's a guy by the name of Richard Bosworth, great friend of mine. Boz outsourced the gaming. So the gaming floor is run by a separate entity. It's run by Mohegan Sun, so the tribe out of Connecticut. And they're running the casino floor. So Mohegan Sun had to go get licensed and everything else. But Nevada said, well, you're getting gaming revenue off of this. We need you to be licensed too, Boz. And so he had to go through suitability and figure out, if he was suitable just as much. Because even though he didn't have any direct access to the floor, he basically, they're his tenant, there was still that linkage. There's not that with sports betting over everything. The second thing I have potential concern about, and you don't see this as much, I could show you an example of blatant match fixing that you have, and this isn't with teams, but it was with a ref, and it was a soccer match. I think it was somewhere in Africa that showed me a couple of weeks ago, where there was a team getting ready to score. The score was 1-0. If they would have counted the goal, it would have been tied up at 1. And the ref, with 3 minutes left in the game, so it's the 87th minute of a 90-minute match, calls the game and says time's out. And it's like just right before they scored. And it's like, what are you doing here? And so they complain and they're like, oh, sorry, my watch was off, whatever else. Well, then they went to go score again and he did the same thing. And so they caught the guy for match fixing. Now, we've had examples of match fixing in the past in the United States. The most recent one in college was, the Arizona State scandal with the refs and everything else and missing free throws. You can go back to the Black Sox. 99.9% of that doesn't occur. But, the most recent allegation off of that came with the mess with the Dolphins, that the owner was supposedly paying the head coach $100,000 to throw the game every week so they'd lose, so they'd get the number 1 draft pick. Now, if that were ever to come to fruition, if that was the case, that has implications on a sports betting world because, you literally have a game where the coach is arguing not to win, which, and put his players in a bad situation. So it becomes very unique.
Well,
So
Pete Rose, of course, would be very interested to see where all this goes, because if players can bet, basically,
Yep.
or your team is owning a betting thing, whether Pete would be in trouble today with this or not would be an interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the funny thing is Pete Rose lives here. I mean, the one thing about Vegas is we get all the interesting sports retired guys. Pete Rose lives here, still does autographs. OJ lives here. There's a few others along the way. And I just wonder if some point we could just have a whole convention of all the outcasts from sports over the years.
All the has-beens.
Yeah.
So who are you working with in Wisconsin to make us be more like Tennessee or Nebraska or somebody? Is there a legislator, or is there a vendor, or is it you guys? I mean, what are we missing?
So interesting you should bring that up. And right now I'm not currently engaged with anybody in Wisconsin over everything. We've done a number of things over the years with the Oneida tribe. We did not help them, though, choose their sports betting partner. I would have actually had them choose somebody else along the way. And let me digress there, and then I'll go back to Wisconsin, because this is something I thought about that I should have had earlier. The other thing you'll find with sports betting is who's coming in to operate it. Okay. So in the cases of Oneida, they felt like they had a strong brand and they just wanted to build the back end systems. So it becomes Oneida Sportsbook. Okay. So they're working with a group called IGT, which also does slot machines and a host of other things, to be able to get their sportsbook in operation, run all the back end systems. Other places, and I'll use a tribe in Michigan as an example off of this, Bay Mills, which is up in the Upper Peninsula. They went and got DraftKings as their provider. So DraftKings works, statewide for them. They get a check off of it. But it's completely driven by what I refer to mostly as B2C operators, which are ones that go directly to the consumer. And that's where you get the DraftKings, the FanDuels, the MGMs, the Wins, the Points Bets, all of those along the way, the Barstools, Penn National, the gamut. There's also just as many as those. There's equally number of the IGTs, the Side Games, the Cambys, the GANs, all of these else along the way that provide back-end systems and basically allow you to white label it up front over everything. Back to your Wisconsin situation. I actually was surprised, and Oneida is my witness to this. I said, when they told me, yeah, we've rejiggered the compact and we're able to do sports betting, I said, some legislator is going to come in and say, well, I want a piece of that. Why don't we expand it beyond the tribes? I'm still waiting for that shoe to drop along the way, because I think, as you articulated or asked earlier, how does that look for the Bucks, or how does that look for Green Bay to be able to say something of, hey, here's my partner and here's how I want to go about it, and so I can have a book in there so that I can have, Betway as it relates to the Bucks doing stuff statewide. And that'll come over the course of time, but it's just going to take that second round, I think, to get there and be able to do that. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, it's Wisconsin. I mean, we had a legislator on last fall or last spring about not legalizing marijuana either for medicinal or recreational purposes. And the same thing now with gambling. And of course, I'm from Tennessee. So when you say Tennessee, and I grew up with blue laws, if any
Yep.
state's not going to allow things, I'm thinking Tennessee. And when I came to Wisconsin 35 years ago, I thought of it be the kind of place where, this would be what you would be doing here. You would missing out on either both, opportunities for financing, taxes and things, but also it seems like the surveying shows that people have wanted the marijuana for sure. I haven't seen the betting surveys, but for a place that, the Friday night fish fries and drinking that I came to, I was really surprised to see such, sort of Puritan approach, at least by our legislators.
No, absolutely. Well, and I will tell you as you bring that up, and I don't say this solely about sports betting, but I'll say this just about gaming in general. Legislators tend to be more, and I'm going to use the term conservative, but let me qualify that. When it comes to the gaming issue and the marijuana issue or any other vice than what the general public typically is. And I'll give you a case, an example, and gaming in general is very much of a middle road. The far left hates it because you prey on the poor. The far right hates it because it's immoral. Okay. But it's very much of a moderate middle road issue. But I look at, in fact, she's on my screen over here as I look at it because I'm watching the Nebraska legislature on my other screen. A friend of mine, Luann Lanahan, who's a senator from the western portion of Omaha. And Luann, if you sat her down today, and she literally said this when they debated it on the floor last year, I hate gambling. I don't like it. I've never done it. I've never bought a lottery ticket. I've never been in a casino. I just don't like it. She did a constituent survey to say, what do you think about gambling? Over 65% came back and said they support it. And so literally what she said, and pardon my French when I say this, is she goes, Brendan, I know I have a chip sandwich on my plate. How do I fix it? And how do I make it better? So legislators tend to be conservative.
Casinos in Wisconsin that are on Native American, it's run by them.
Somebody could mute their, could
They don't
someone
always
please
get the money. Somebody
mute? Thank you so much.
The other thing off of that I'll just add, and this goes across everything. I've got plurality in Georgia that you sit here and look at the map and go, okay, Georgia doesn't have everything. 60 to 70% of Georgia voters want sports betting or casino gaming. I can't get above 51 right now in the legislature to get it on the ballot. I think I'm close this year. I think we'll come close. So
what amount of money might we have as a state if you made a projection? Let's say I was a legislator, I called you up and it said, I want to support this, and I'm going to start drafting some things. What numbers might I look at in terms of what we might be able to get as a state to use for education or roads or whatever else? And what are states seeing? What's showing up?
Well, I would probably classify you in the same category I do with Colorado, as I've talked to my friends in Minnesota. Is you're a state that cares a heck of a lot about sports. So sports is very much between the Bucks, between the Packers, even the University of Wisconsin. You love your sports, both professional and college. Okay. So there's an affiliation there, and it's sort of, hey, we've got our one team in football, we've got our one team in basketball, so on and so forth. We're always going to support along the way. Colorado is in that, and Colorado blew, everybody sort of off the doors over how much revenue they're able to generate off of sports betting, and what gets thrown in there. Now, so I'd use that as my baseline. Then I'd take and say, okay, how do you want to craft the market? Do you want only a land-based approach? Do you want a full mobile approach? Or is there somewhere in between? That's literally the conversation I'm having with Minnesota right now, as we're trying to get all 11 tribes on the same page to say, hey, here's how we're moving forward. And literally, as I was in between the airport last Wednesday, I pulled over to the side and I was calculating out numbers by hand of saying, here's roughly where I think revenue might be based off of X, Y, and Z, type thing. So it depends on how you want to craft the market after that. And then you can say, okay, Here's how much we're going to generate in tax revenue. Does it go to schools? Does it go to roads? Whatever else that is. The one thing I will always couch though with people is sometimes you win with sports betting and sometimes you lose. And I'll use Nevada as an example. There was this year it was $179 million that was wagered on the Super Bowl here in Nevada. If you go back 4 years ago or so, I want to say maybe that was 110, 130, something like that. So it's still a significant number of what was wagered. The problem was by the time you paid everybody out and the books took a wash, because they about did, there was only out of that 1 million that was taxable along the way.
Wow.
Because the books almost lost money off of that. And if the books go negative, you're not making any tax revenue off of that. So some of that is obviously luck of the draw over everything. So realize some cases you're going to see a win of 10% based off of that. Others you might see 0 along the way. And then other factors come into play of, can I deduct promotional play? Can I deduct the excise tax? Some of those that, change the tax rate along the way. Pennsylvania being the best example of that. Pennsylvania has a tax rate of 36%. But if you look at the effective, because they can deduct promotional play and the excise tax, they're only paying about 25% in taxes.
Wow. Oh. So one of the things that comes up a lot with this is what's the issue for youth coming into this? And I assume that you get questions like this from other legislators. And I think it goes along the line of, as kids are playing so much war games or Fortnite or whatever, there's things involving money they can get and they can earn, and that they're so much more facile and used to doing the online activities, that it's a short step between that and what might happen with gaming and betting for kids. So what kind of questions do you hear on that? What do you say to people about that?
So, there's a couple things to unpackage there. One is, let me take the sports betting and then I'll sort of shift over to esports and loot boxes and all of that. As I said earlier, there are 10 times more protections on this than there are if I walk into a sports book with a fake ID. Because here I can say, okay, Brendan doesn't match up. His social security number says he's 18, he's not 21, whatever else along the way. Now, what I can't prevent is if I go give this to my kid and say, go bet to your heart's content, that's just me being a bad parent, not me, doing anything else along the way. As it relates to sort of what you're talking about with online and everything else, esports is definitely where things are headed and creating a new sports betting category. And I say that from the standpoint of, yes, the Fortnites and all of those along the way. The challenge with that is there aren't the protections in those games that you have with a Bucks game or a Packers game, because I don't know if everybody's on the same playing field. Because is your internet connection better than mine because we're playing things at different rates?
Oh.
Are you doing drug testing so I know that Terry's playing by the book and Brendan's hopped up on something, so he has quicker reflexes and everything else. So when you get everybody on that, the other thing is, there's Easter eggs in these games, Easter eggs being little tricks to make things go faster. Does that violate any code, as it doesn't with a slot machine? Because every slot machine or sports betting back-end system has to be tested and proven that you can't cheat the system. Now, that said, there needs to be some more protections put into place off of those things, because what you talked about as far as the rewards and the purchasing and some of those types of things that can get kids in trouble off of that, which is basically loot boxes saying, hey, if you go spend $10 today, you're going to go get these tools so you can go fight off these things, or go to this next level. That's where you need to figure out where those parameters come into place. And obviously, Apple and Google Play and all of those are working through those. But there's one thing I always play on my phone while I'm waiting for the plane to take off, because I can't do anything else. And there, I mean, I don't do it, but I can't tell you every time I open up the app, it's, hey, you know, for $10, you can get X amount of tools and go on to the next level. And I'm like, I just want to play the old school way that I win by skill and not by buying my way in. But, you know, it's sort of the nature of the beast.
So there is a question. How much, can you finish up your discussion? If we're like Colorado, how much revenue might we generate? I mean, in the first, I know you're saying there's lots of varieties, but let's say we did
Let me
mobile
do some, yeah.
and we just went with it.
Let me do some math here real quick. So bear with me. I'll keep talking while I'm doing this because I'm trying to remember Colorado's revenue. Let me find this on my phone here real quick. So based off of, so for the last calendar year, Colorado had a handle of 3.8 million, which equated about $250 million in revenue, which is about a 6.5% hold. Based off of their tax rate, let's say a tax rate of 8%. We'll just use that because the Midwest tends to be lower with the exception of Illinois. That would equate to $20 million in revenue to the state. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I don't remember percentage wise what you are different from Colorado versus Wisconsin, but I mean, that's an example that, you know, it's not significant money. No,
Right.
There's not this panacea that all of a sudden, woohoo, we got a great windfall.
Right.
You know, and I'll tell you, as you talk about that, it brings me back to a conversation. I remember being on a radio show in Michigan right after the repeal of PASPA. And there was a rep on that said, hey, I'm going to use the $1 billion we're going to get from sports betting and fix all the roads that I'm driving down right now and everything else. Well, what the problem was he was getting handle and revenue confused off of where that was. So back to the Colorado example off of that, I think I said it was 3.8. You know, they had 3.8 million or 8 billion, excuse me, that they had wagered on in the state within the last year. Okay. Now, if I tax that at 8%, that's a much more significant number. But obviously, out of handle, I got to pay everybody else on this call because we all were winners, as we determined earlier. So whatever's left after that is what then gets taxed, which is the actual revenue.
Wow, that is not much. And
Yeah.
someone notices in the chat that perhaps even our lottery was oversold in the benefits that it never generated the money that it was estimated. And the dog tracks, the 5 dog tracks are all gone, you know, that we had.
Yeah. Where the biggest opportunity, and this is me, I'll get on my soapbox, where the biggest opportunity for Wisconsin to make money off of gaming, and you've got to figure out how best to do it, but where there's lost money is go to any bar or pub and you see all those machines that sit in there. Yeah. Some of them that look like the $30,000 slot machines I can go to any floor in Vegas and see. Those have a very nominal registration fee attached to them, and the revenue goes straight to whatever the local place is that has them. That's a lost opportunity for gaming revenue in your state that's being not recouped by anybody.
And I'm not sure they're even legal.
They're legal because they're considered a game of amusement, but that's it. They are, by definition, because I've actually seen them, slot machines. I would argue they're probably a violation of the compact with the tribes, but no one wants to do anything about them. I'll give you another case example. Nebraska, which just legalized gaming in 2020. I was out in the panhandle of the state. Woman that I checked into the hotel knew nothing about my background. And she goes, well, if you get bored, we've got our little mini casino out back along the way. And I walked back there after dinner and everything else because I sort of forgot about it because I wanted to get in my room and get to work on a few things. And I went back and there were 12 slot machines just sitting back there.
Wow.
And they were all out of date on their amusement tax, which is $500 a year. And the state got zero revenue off of it. So yeah, they're legal, but they're not legal.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Anybody who's been in a bar in Wisconsin has shipped dice, get the payouts on those little machines.
Yep.
One question from a participant is, so what entertainment categories are losing out? As the money moves to gambling, who's losing?
That's a very good question. And I'll be honest, I don't want to sound like a politician saying I don't know the answer, but there's definitely been a shift with the pandemic to be able to say, where are those dollars coming from? Because gaming has surged over the last 2 years since it's been allowed to reopen. And I will tell you, part of that money we initially thought was everybody taking their stimulus check and going down to the casino and doing it. And there was definitely a correlation from that, because if you saw stimulus checks arrive on a Monday, that next week there was an increase in play along the way. So there definitely was that correlation between everything. Now, that said, gaming still has done exceptionally well. We're on our 10th. I don't think January will be, and I might be wrong, but Nevada from December on back had 10 straight months of $1 billion in gaming revenue, which is our longest streak. We've had that, everything else along the way.
Wow.
Where all that money's coming from, other than some pent up demand from the pandemic, I'm still trying to figure out where it's shifting from.
Well, speaking of that, have there been any academic studies on the impact of legal or illegal gaming and gambling and gaming? Are you familiar
There
with
have been
any?
a number over the course of time, and there's a host of universities that are really good at doing these. I haven't done one in Wisconsin. The last one I did with an academic, we tried to pitch one in Illinois off of something. I've got one cooking in Nebraska. But they'll definitely look at that saying, hey, here's where the dollars are captured from and what they're doing, as well as not only, what's the economic benefit, but then what are the potential social impacts? And you need to look at both when you look at that. And that's no different. There's a bill that will get heard here in about an hour in Nebraska that I had them insert a study like that so that you have that in place.
And I assume that goes to addiction, the kind of things that can be built in to protect or help people.
Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And that definitely, I have a colleague and she's a dear friend of mine too, that she specializes in responsible gaming and making sure there's funding in place. And she said, I'm getting screwed in some of these cases because of the revenue that says, hey, I'm supposed to get 2%, but by the time it all comes in, sometimes I end up losing, or I get very little off of that. And what I've told her is, I said, you don't have, it's a revenue problem, but you have a windfall, not a windfall, a waterfall problem. So it depends on where your 2% is coming out. I said, right now you're at the bottom of the waterfall because it has to trickle to here, to here, to here, to here, so that you get your dollars. I said, you need to up your rank in the waterfall so you're higher up so we can have resources to do that. And that's one thing I will say, the industry I'm in, it's a fabulous industry, but they have to continue to make sure that safety net exists for those people that do have a problem. And granted, it's a small percentage. Typically it's roughly around 2% that have a highly addictive problem with gambling. But you want to make sure there's resources there. I've been in one jurisdiction, and this was an international one, but it just opened up, and I was in charge from my operator's perspective that I was working with at the time to implement their entire program. And so I called the national hotline to say, is there resources in place should I have a problem? And they came back and said, call me back on Tuesday. And I'm like, but I have a problem. And they're like, we don't have anybody to help you. So you've got to have that whole gamut covered.
Wow. This is a long way from the bingo. The things that at least I grew up with down again in Tennessee was bingo, and the state put an end to that for a lot of places because they said if it has to involve a prize, a consideration, and chance. So the consideration is money, a chance you may not win, and there's a prize. And if it fit those, that's gambling. And so you could if you dropped one of those three, and so around the churches and bingo places, they had to drop one of the three, and the one of the three they dropped was you paid something. And so bingo sort of went down because if you didn't pay, $5, if you want to play 5 cards, $1 a card, but a prize, consideration, and chance. And so you had to drop out one of those. And that just, sort of took all the fun out of bingo, and it couldn't continue to do it. The churches just couldn't do it anymore down in Tennessee.
Yeah, no. And that's one of those that you have to understand the whole gamut and obviously make sure that it's done right and above board. Because if you have that, you're going to have an impact off of how that goes that, in some cases has supported local youth groups and churches and other support things along the way. And if that money goes by the wayside, those guys are looking for other mechanisms to get their revenue, or then you run into a situation where you don't have it. So.
Well, this all makes me want to watch Godfather, whichever it was, when they moved to Vegas, to move the gambling to Vegas and forget what was going on in New York.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, movies like that have been a help and a hindrance along the way in jurisdictions. And I say that knowing most people here probably know the movie Casino from the 80s. And that movie has done wonders for screwing up how Japan might look at a market over the course of time, because as opposed to building this big extravagant building that has hotel and meeting space and F&B and has a small portion, only 3% of a facility like that in Japan can be the casino. And so here you've got 97% of the building that's everything else.
Oh.
If you go ask the Japanese what these buildings are, it is one big building that is just the movie Casino, and they think it takes up the whole structure. So.
Well, excuse me. Well, I think we're getting close to the witching hour here. Have you got other stuff that we should know about before you?
No, I hope that gave you a flavor of where sports betting sits. I see Wisconsin, while the tribes have started the process, I think it's far from over, and you're going to see some continued evolution over things as it goes. So, I'd be more than happy to come back to you and talk to you guys at any point in time, because I think you're a good group. And, if there's other things on gaming you want to talk about, more than happy to come back anytime. So I love doing sessions like this.
Well, thank you, Brendan. I really appreciate you taking the time, and good luck in Kansas. And we'll be watching this as it moves across the country.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll say the fun thing for a kid from Nebraska, one, I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing, because, you talk about conservatism and, Midwest and all of that sort of stuff. I never thought I'd be doing this, but, my path over the next month, as you said, I go to Kansas later on today. Next week, I leave Saturday for Georgia, the country. And then I've got to be back in Thursday for a hearing in Nebraska. So I've got an operator over in Tbilisi that's looking for, or I should say a hotel that's looking for an operator for their casino that I'm going to go do. And then I come back and go to the Racing Commission in Nebraska. So it's the whole gamut across the way.
Wow. Well, it's really exciting. And I really appreciate your interest in the policy pieces of it. I think that's the stuff that really drives what we're curious about. So you've given us the good stuff, a good background to get us going.
It's what makes it happen. So, and you got to do it right.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's very, very well done. Very, very clear.
That.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your guys' time today. And, as things happen down the road, I'd love to come back to this group if you'd invite me. So feel free to reach out anytime.
I'll be in touch. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. I'm glad I can make it this time. I apologize again for not being here in November.
It was worth the wait. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You're very kind.
Before we lose everybody, just a reminder that tonight, Tony Evers' State of the State address, if you want to watch that. It's so odd to me to be in Madison and not have, on election day, not to have a primary to vote for anything. I got up this morning, I looked at the calendar and I thought, wait, did I miss it? Wait, that school board? No, mayor, no. And to have literally not to have something to vote on was really odd for me. I can't remember that happening.
And don't forget
Very
to bet on the Badgers against Indiana tonight.
Ah, okay. Well, thanks so much, everybody. And see you in a couple of weeks. Trying to remember who we have next. Dennis, do I have that with me?
I think it's one of the three that Kurt was describing.
Kurt's setting up something on international rainforest and forestry, and or the supply chain, and or the future of crypto. Actually, the future of banks. What's the future of banks, given what's going on with currency and crypto? And so it'll be one of those three. Dennis did tell you we have Senator Baldwin for March 15th. We have a woman from University of Washington, Rachel Moran, who will speak on information and disinformation on the 29th of March. We've got Monte Ball. There's one for you, Brendan, one of our old football players who Monte was had a lot of after college, some mental health and other issues. And I think gambling was part of it, as well as others. That'll be curious to come up. And at the very end, we have Rolf Wagenke from the retiring from the Wisconsin Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, talk about the future of colleges, particularly private colleges, what's going on with higher education in Wisconsin. So that's our lineup to get us up through May. Dennis, you have anything else you want to say?
Nope. Thanks very much. Yeah, another good set of questions and good discussion. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks again, Brendan. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye now.